Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair station square where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the rage of half centuries past, a pair of star-crossed foes begin their endless fight, whose misadventures, piteous overthrows, doth clash with their righteous strife. The fearful passage of a vengeance-marked quest will clash the blaze of their rage, which, but their world's end, naught could remove, is now the 1 hour traffic of our stage.
Households, both alike in dignity, in fair station square, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the rage of half centuries past, a pair of star-crossed foes, the endless fight.
On the 23rd of June 2001, Sonic Adventure 2 Chaos controlled itself into Japan, with the United States and Europe following in February and May of the following year. Directed by Takashi Iizuka and produced by Yuji Naka, the game builds upon everything that made the first title such a hit. Sonic Adventure may have laid the foundations for future 3D Sonic titles, but Sonic Adventure 2 improved upon it in virtually every way, with one or two questionable decisions which we'll get to. Oh, we're gonna get to you, Indiana Knuckles. Unlike the first title, which had an overarching prime narrative in which we saw the events unfold through 6 unique characters, each with their own subplot and experience, Sonic Adventure 2 splits the narrative between 2 individual teams. You have the hero side with Sonic and his friends, and their rivals, Team Dark, in which Eggman and his co-conspirators are up to their dastardly deeds. The campaigns are subdivided into multiple playable characters, resulting in a very mixed gameplay experience. The resulting narrative and story experiences are initially quite confusing. The plot doesn't become clear until you play the rival story and you see why certain events played out the way they did.
Hurry and get back here right now before the island blows up with you on it!
Blows up? Where he will set the timer on these dynamite packs. Once that is in place, we will blow up the whole island.
As with the first title, upon completing the 2 standard campaigns, a final last story mode is unlocked, in which you take every playable character into a final mission and eventually defeat the final boss in an epic showdown. Critics at the time were very positive towards the game, praising Sonic Team for once again making an excellent title. Despite many stating that they preferred the original, Adventure 2 was looked at very favourably. Today, it's still considered to be a highly recommended must-play title and a must-own title for those who are interested in Sonic games and retro gaming. So, grab your emeralds and prepare to It's time to take a look back at what was going to be the last ever Sonic game, Sonic Adventure 2.
What do you mean the last ever Sonic game? You can't just say something like that, fade to black, and then be done with it. Yeah, okay, I know, but there was actually a lot of evidence to suggest that this indeed was going to be the last ever Sonic game, so we will come to this closer to the end of the video. For now, I think we should probably recap the story of this game. But before we get into this, I have to take a few moments to talk about something which is actually pretty close to my heart. It's a game that I've been playing daily for pretty much the last 16 years, who happen to be the sponsor of today's video. I am of course talking about the game Torn.
Welcome to Torn, a free-to-play city filled with wannabe kingpins and criminal barons. You start out as an odd-job chancer, but eventually work your way up the ranks to rule and dominate. With over 2 million players standing in your way, how will you create your criminal empire? Become a major crime lord? Manipulate the stock market for billions? Take to the skies and smuggle contraband? Create a vast corporate empire in which other players will work for you? Or will you be the one who gains the trust of hundreds of players, lead them into war, and split the rewards with your team? Unless, of course, you're actually secretly double-crossing your side for your own glory. Or maybe you'll decide to punish everyone by bringing the city to its knees. Craft a weapon of mass destruction and hold the entire game hostage. I've been playing this game for over 16 years and I still haven't done everything there is to do. And if you're thinking, you don't really play this game.
No, really, I do. I've been playing this game daily for 16 years and I've made loads of friends in that time, and I would love for viewers of this channel to join the game and play alongside me. If you join up and need help with something, or just a little bit confused about how part of the game works, feel free to send me a message in the game and I'll be more than happy to help you out. And as a special for viewers of this channel, the first 5 people who join using the referral code in the video description will receive an in-game cash prize of 1 million Ton City dollars. And the first person who joins using the referral code that manages to get all the way to level 10, you're going to get a bonus prize of 10 million Ton City dollars to help you get started. So join today using my referral link in the video description. And remember guys, if you need any help or any advice on how to get started, please feel free to message me in the game itself and I'll be more than happy to get back in touch with you and share some advice on what the best way is to get started. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the city. And with that out of the way, let's get talking about Sonic Adventure 2.
Sonic Adventure 2's story is... well, in terms of what actually happens in it, it's quite good. But in terms of how the story is actually delivered and structured, it's close to a complete mess. Like with my Sonic Adventure retrospective, I intend to explain this further in a follow-up through the Looking Glass analysis video, but let's just recount the events of the game so we're all on the same page. Purely for an ease of explanation, I'll be combining the main events of each campaign. Upon learning about his grandfather's secret research, Dr. Eggman launches an attack against Prison Island in an attempt to steal a top-secret military weapon. But the weapon turns out to be a living creature named Shadow the Hedgehog. As thanks for releasing him, Shadow agrees to work for Eggman on the condition that Eggman follows him to the abandoned space colony known as Ark. Off-screen, we learn that Shadow has been busy committing serious crimes in order to steal a Chaos Emerald. The authorities, upon seeing it's a great big hedgehog committing these crimes, instantly blame Sonic, who is captured and arrested. Sonic escapes both custody and the city, only to encounter Shadow. Before he can apprehend him and clear his name, Shadow demonstrates why he's the ultimate life form through a powerful ability known as Chaos Control.
It's not his speed, he must be using the Chaos Emerald to warp.
The authorities arrive and Sonic is captured again! This time he's imprisoned at Prison Island.
Originality is a thing that does actually improve with this game. Believe me, I swear it does.
Meanwhile, on Angel Island...
Knuckles is attempting to defend the Master Emerald from jewel thief Rouge the Bat, but before they can fight, Eggman arrives and steals the emerald for himself, but Knuckles smashes it, scattering the fragments across the globe. Back on the space colony Ark, Shadow reveals to Eggman that the space station is home to a weapon of mass destruction known as the Eclipse Cannon. Shadow explains that the weapon needs all the Chaos Emeralds in order for it to be fully charged. Little does Eggman know, Shadow secretly has his own agenda, and is just using Eggman as a means to fulfill a promise of revenge. Rouge arrives and gains their trust by offering them one of the missing emeralds. The villains then come up with a scheme to steal the remaining gems. Eggman and Shadow attack a military base, whilst Rouge sneaks into the security vault to take the remaining emeralds.
Meanwhile, with the help of Tails...
Amy is able to rescue Sonic. Despite some battles between the heroes and the villains, Eggman and his team succeed in their heist, and they blow up Prison Island and make their escape. Blamed for both the robberies and the destruction, Sonic and his friends are considered fugitives, and they go on the run. But before they can come up with a plan to clear their names, Eggman demands the complete surrender of Earth and demonstrates his newly acquired power by firing the Eclipse Cannon at the moon. He then threatens to use the cannon on the Earth itself if his demands are not met. Using the one Chaos Emerald in their possession, the heroes are able to trace Eggman to his secret desert base.
Actually, that's not how they do it. This entire plotline is dropped in the very next scene, along with a really neat thematic device that they were doing up until this point, which is also dropped. How we actually find out where Eggman is via an interception of the president's limo. I told you the storytelling in this game is just a little bit of a mess.
Eggman retreats to the space colony Ark with the heroes in close pursuit. Aboard the space station, Tails reveals a fake Chaos Emerald which can be used to destroy the Eclipse Cannon. As he's about to use it, both he and Amy are captured by Eggman. Sonic arrives, but he too is captured by Eggman, who launches him into space and blows him up. But just before the blast, Sonic was able to use Chaos Control himself to make it back onto the space station safely. In the resulting confusion, Eggman is able to sneak away with the final emerald and fully charges up the Eclipse Cannon. But it's all been for nothing! The cannon was a trap set by Eggman's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. In a pre-recorded message, as punishment for the death of his granddaughter, he secretly implemented a fail-safe into the Eclipse Cannon. If anyone were ever to fully power it up, the space colony would crash land on the Earth, killing everyone on the planet itself. Initially, Shadow is reluctant to help, believing that this is justice for Maria's death, but Amy's pleas get through to him and he recalls how Maria wanted him to forgive the people and make their lives better. Shadow immediately joins the efforts.
I've gotta go now. I have to keep my promise to Maria and you.
And he's able to destroy the prototype Ultimate Life form, the Bio Lizard. Before they can defeat the creature, it uses Chaos Control and fuses itself to the outside of the Eclipse Cannon, continuing the Ark's collision course with the Earth. Sonic and Shadow use the power of the Chaos Emeralds to transform into their super forms. They fly through space and destroy the monster, preventing the colony from impacting Earth. In the resulting explosion, it seems that Shadow hasn't survived the fight. Both the heroes and villains reflect on what's just happened, the characters return to Earth, and the space colony continues to drift through space.
In terms of what actually happens, it's considered a fan favourite and you can really see why. However, critically speaking, it does have a number of problems. Several plot lines and even some really cool thematic ideas that they were going with are just dropped completely or forgotten about altogether, which is a shame because there are some evidence and some examples in the game itself of really subtle, nuanced character interactions that do elevate this from a typical Sonic experience.
For example, this one scene between Knuckles and Rouge suggests they've developed an attraction and an affection for each other. When Eggman talks with Tails during the credits, there's a sense that Eggman has realised that he could become like his grandfather and actually destroy all life on Earth. And this realisation almost seems horrifying to him. He sounds somewhat remorseful, as if he intends to change his ways, realising that if he continues on this path, he's going to become something that almost sickens him to his core.
I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
Can you name me one other character, either good or bad, in the Sonic series that experienced this kind of self-reflection and remorse to the point where they denounce their entire life's ideology? This would be an amazing piece of character development worthy of an academic study, but then in Sonic Unleashed, Eggman literally does a granddad. Never mind.
Success! A brilliant success!
Did he really mean to destroy us?
So I do want to discuss the story in more detail because whilst it's clearly had a massive impact on the Sonic fandom in the last 20 years, I personally think it does have a number of issues with how it presents itself, especially with how it employs some of the thematic devices that it uses to try and elevate itself above your typical, if you excuse the pun, Sonic adventure. But right now, I need to go get some more coffee, so you just sit back there and watch the next section whilst I go put the kettle on.
Sonic Adventure had been a huge hit for Sega, and a direct sequel was inevitable, but Sega's operations made several changes internally, which clearly impacted the direction and the development of the title. Shortly after the first game's release, Sonic Team decided to set up studio in San Francisco and give it the most original of all names, Sonic Team USA. Several of the Japanese development team who had worked on the first game relocated to America, and their first big project was Sonic Adventure 2. In the first title, the goal was to make a Sonic game as realistic as possible, detailed exotic locations being as true to life as the Dreamcast would allow. In order to do this as accurately as possible, the team was sent on a world tour to experience and fully document truly stunning locations, from vast uninhabitable deserts, dense jungles full of exotic and unique wildlife, to mountains that seem to disappear into the sky. The developers explored the vast diversity of human civilization and channeled all of that into making an incredible experience that made the player feel like they were travelling the globe with Sonic. For Sonic Adventure 2, the team were told, go play outside. And you can't get away from it. The team took heavy inspiration from their new location when it came to designing the entire game. Multiple stages are effectively a homage to San Francisco itself. Even two of the mini-games, the karting stages, are both named after real-world highways which run through that city. But they do expand to other iconic locations within the state. For instance, both Wild Canyon and Skyrail take inspiration from Yosemite National Park. And if you've actually visited that place and wondered, why haven't I ever seen giant pumpkin mountains there? Well, you're just not spooky enough. But if you are one of the few unlucky people whose insight level is too low, just look at the rocks in Wild Canyon and certainly the skyline in this scene and compare it to the real-world photos of Yosemite National Park, and you can clearly see the inspiration. Much like with the first title, the team actually visited these locations in order to fully understand what it was like to walk, navigate, and truly experience those environments for themselves. Much like the original game, several of the photographs that they took were used as textures within Sonic Adventure 2. So in terms of the specific research that Sonic Team did with regards to the development of Sonic Adventure 2, this is where it kinda differs from that of the first game, because we just really don't know much about what Sonic Team did. Oh hey, so I'm gonna stand here because I think it makes talking to you guys and showing media that I need to reference to on as clear a background as possible slightly easier and better for your viewing experience. See, I do care about you.
With the first Sonic Adventure, Sonic Team released their own mini-documentary, as well as loads of photos that actually document the research trip that they did. For Sonic Adventure 2, they only released these two images, which are about as clear as looking at a stamp with an eye infection. If we could only pinpoint the precise location of these streets, we could probably figure out a lot more, like the places they went to, and actually see the real-world locations for ourselves. Since I don't live there, this is pretty much an impossible task.
But hold on, Daddy-O me. Let us take another look at that poor quality image for just a few moments. Whilst it's blurry and you can't make out precise details, the photo was clearly taken on top of one of the city's iconic hills, and that's quite the specific looking tall building in the background. There can't be that many areas in the city which give you this specific view of this specific building at this specific angle, and oh, here it is. According to the data provided by Google Street View, the picture was taken at 1234 Montgomery Street, and while Street View doesn't give a perfect like-for-like shot and angle, you can clearly make out this building on the left and the red-looking building on the right, as well as other identifying elements, both of which match up with the original photo and Google Street View.
Ah, but what about that second photo? It doesn't have any clear landmarks. It could take us weeks to find that specific spot.
Oh, it's actually just around the corner from the first picture. The other location is 311 Union Street. Whilst there have been some minor alterations to the look of the buildings on the left, the trees are all in the right place, and those three brown box-shaped buildings are more or less as they were 20 years ago. In fact, when you look at the unique shape of those trees, the steepness of this hill, those parked cars which are close together, and the Victorian architecture of those homes, where have we seen this street before?
So it's not quite one-to-one. City Escape is an amalgamation of different landmarks and locations throughout the entirety of San Francisco, and Union Street itself is a very long street. We can't just take these two photos and say this was the only spot. There's bound to be other locations, so where do we go from here? Does the game itself maybe contain any other clues that would help us identify more spots that were visited throughout the city? Well, the answer to that question is yes.
If we do a bit of detective work in the game itself, and pay close attention to some of the smaller details in City Escape, well, what do we have here?
Parking signs. No.
Parking from 6 to 8 AM on a Wednesday for street cleaning. So all we have to do now is find where the streets are cleaned between that time on that day. But wait, that kind of activity probably happens in a large area across the city. No, we need something that we can pin down a little more. What about some of the other parking signs? Parking permits. Maybe we can narrow down the search area if we consult the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. Perhaps they have a map showing these parking zones that's free to view on their website. They do. Parking zones A, C, and K all intersect in the northeast of the city. But what about Union Street and the spots where these two photographs were taken? Where do they fit on this map? Bingo. And we can actually narrow down the search area further thanks to Zone G. We're not looking for that, meaning we need to find a spot which favours parking for permit holders of Zones A, C, and K, but not G. And there can't be that many spots. Too far north and Zone C is no longer within the parking equation, so we're looking for a spot that's slightly to the right of Zone K, but not too far north of G and C. Even factoring in some changes to the parking permit system over time, we've just narrowed down Sonic Team's fact-finding trip from an entire city to just a few city blocks.
Well, how about that? Now that we've got all this information, it shouldn't take us too long to find. Right?
But despite my best efforts, I just couldn't find this correct parking combination. It simply never showed up. It does seem that in the 20 years since Sonic Team did their fact-finding mission, the parking regulations have indeed changed. So even if you went to San Francisco yourself and searched every single individual street, it's completely impossible. What is that? Two-hour parking, 8 AM to 4 PM, 6 PM to 9 PM, Monday to Saturday, zones A, C, and K. And directly above it, no parking, 6 AM to 8 AM for street cleaning. Ladies and gentlemen, non-binary, and everyone else around and in between, we have found one of the locations that made City Escape. Sort of. The precise location of this combination of signs, if you'd like to check it out for yourself, is 1565 Broadway in San Francisco. This must have been one of the locations that Sonic Team went to during their fact-finding exercise. There is no other spot in the entire city that has this combination of parking instructions.
Actually, that's not true. There's one other location in the city that allows you to do this, and you're gonna think I made it up when I tell you where it is.
It's just up this hill on Green Street. Yes, the only other place is in the Green Hill Zone.
So how do these three streets look when we actually plot them on a map? Are they close together?
They're almost directly next to each other.
But wait, there's more!
Remember Route 101, the stage which is named after one of the major highways that runs through San Francisco? It runs right through both of these streets.
Wow! I wonder what the buildings look like at this intersection.
Whilst some of the building architecture matches that of City Escape in this area, there are similar structures and architecture like this all over the city, so let's take a look at some other influences, like the iconic cable cars. This particular design only runs on two specific lines, which are found in the northeastern portion of the city. Another location which was suggested to me by the users of the San Francisco subreddit was the Stockton Street Tunnel, and City Escape does indeed have a very small tunnel section close to the end. There's also a section in Mission Street in which a longer tunnel section is used, and it appears in a very similar way to that of the real-life counterpart. And of course, how could anyone forget the Golden Gate Bridge? Oh, there she stands. What a feat of human engineering. You don't even need to be told that's the Golden Gate Bridge. You can tell. You can just tell.
Except, this isn't the design of the Golden Gate Bridge. This is actually designed after the Oakland Bay Bridge. Sonic Team painted it red to fool the majority of players into thinking it's actually the Golden Gate Bridge.
I even found a strong candidate for the light fittings that you find in the small park section of City Escape. In a few parks around the northeastern portions of the city, there's actually light fittings like this.
But what about all that iconic rail grinding? That must be based on a real-world location, right?
This is extremely difficult to pin down. San Francisco does indeed have a lot of famous staircases, some of which are major tourist attractions. Many of these are potential candidates, but it's difficult to say for certain. One possible staircase is this one, located near a famous row of houses called the Painted Ladies. But then again, look at Union Square. All those staircases and handrails, it could so easily be this too.
Hey, remember when I said that there was only 2 pictures of the developers standing in real-world locations? Well, there's actually a third one, and chances are you've probably seen it every single time you've played the game, and you've not even noticed!
If you stop in City Escape at this location and turn the camera around, you can actually see the reflection of one of the developers who was sent out to take photographs for research for this stage. If someone from Sega is watching this and knows the identity of this man, please let me know. I want to put a name to this person so I can stop calling him Phantom Photo Guy. Sonic Team even channeled some of their experiences that they received from living in their new city into the game itself. Several team members fell foul of local traffic and parking laws, and they were often given parking tickets by city officials who drove around in these small free-wheeled vehicles. So these vehicles ended up being modelled and added into the game, and they were placed in the stage where Tails goes on the rampage as a way to get a little bit of revenge for all the parking tickets they received.
Every single time we'd get a parking ticket, we'd be thinking, there goes another $30. Revenge.
Oh, that sweat emoji is the guilt running down his face, Your Honor. Due to the success of the first game, Takashi Iizuka wanted to build upon the main positives which had been achieved. It was decided that Sonic's gameplay would return and remain unchanged for the most part. Emerald hunting, which had proved to be a surprise hit, would also return, but it would now be heavily modified. And with the surprise success that was Gamma's campaign, the shooting gameplay would also return, but would receive a number of major changes to improve the experience. Compared to the first title, it was decided that the game would be more streamlined. Controversially, this meant that the adventure fields, which had proven to be very popular, were dropped completely in order to allow players to get to the next stage instantly without having to spend time looking for where the next adventure was. In the very early stages of development, a number of concepts were scrapped due to it being well outside of the project scope. One concept which was scrapped completely was the idea of a branching path narrative. In one interview, Iizuka presented the idea of the player being trapped on a sinking submarine. During this stage, the player would have to decide, would Sonic rush through the sinking submarine trying to fix it and eventually bring it safely to port, or simply escaping the submarine as fast as possible as it continued to flood and sink further underwater? This would mean that each time the player played through the campaign, they would experience a completely different narrative. And whilst this plan was dropped, the idea itself was resurrected and fully implemented for the spin-off title, Shadow the Hedgehog. With the first Sonic Adventure game, the entire cast underwent a radical redesign. In Sonic Adventure 2, the cast were changed again, but this time the changes were far more subtle. The best and worst explanation of the changes that I can give is they just look a bit taller, maybe a bit sleeker and more athletic. And after a brief development period, the game was eventually revealed to the public at E3 2000.
And this is where the story of the game's development really goes off the rails.
The original game was revealed at the 1998 Tokyo International Forum, and huge emphasis was placed on there being 6 fully playable characters. It was one of the primary selling points of the game. Hey, you're not buying this just to play as one character, we've got 6 for you to try. But with Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Team were initially very secretive as to what players would find in the game. Sonic's gameplay was showcased, along with Knuckles' emerald hunting, and a few hints that the third playable character would either be Eggman or a mysterious 4th character that ended up being Shadow the Hedgehog.
So, how do you think it went down when it was revealed there were only 3 playable characters in this game, and one of them wasn't Tails?
This caused quite an outcry, not just with the few fans who had internet access back then, but with the general gaming press. To this day, it's never been confirmed if Tails wasn't originally going to be included in the game, or that there was only supposed to be 3 playable characters in total.
As a pure logistics issue, it does seem very unlikely that this rumour is true, but when you dig a little bit deeper and do some more research, there are 1 or 2 things that do sort of hint that maybe this actually was going to happen.
One such piece of supporting evidence is the first announcement trailer itself. It shows Sonic in Skyrail, despite this stage being a shadow stage in the final game. This stage also has upbeat music, which fits more with the musical cues that you find in Sonic stages. The story part of this stage also doesn't really contribute anything to the narrative. It ends the exact same way it begins. The villains realise the heroes are on their way to them, and after the stage, the villains realise that the heroes are on their way to them. Another supporting aspect of this rumour is down to the fact that Tails is in a
nuclear-equipped walking deathmobile.
Tails is a character who's been known for years to fly, yet now he's in a walker mech shooting things, and in one stage he's... It just feels really off and somewhat shoehorned in. Even Sonic Team themselves at the time didn't do a good job at confirming or denying these rumours. Several Sonic Team members would respond to press queries with a simple "wait and see," but Yuji Naka would often get frustrated and outright state, "No, Tails is not in this game. Stop asking me." And as time went on, this rumour went into overdrive when the game had a huge information drop in September 2000 at the Sonic Team Fall Festival. When Sonic Team revealed a bunch of new screenshots for the game over a 10-day period, they only showed Sonic, Knuckles, Eggman, and the Chow as playable characters. There was no sign of Tails and Rouge. Even Shadow was shown at the end of the festival, but not in a playable capacity. It's unknown how long the idea of a secrecy strategy was going to go on for, but these plans went quickly out the window after toy company Resaurus leaked Rouge as being a playable character as part of their Sonic Adventure 2 toy line, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. It was as late as 2 months before release that Tails eventually got revealed as being in the game. And this is even more incredible when you consider that the game was actually delayed to June in 2001, and it's unknown if this was due to development or if it was purely for marketing purposes. Since it was Sonic's 10th anniversary that year, the game would now get some very unique marketing pushes to help capitalise on it being an anniversary release. The game would once again see localization efforts for different territories, with the previous game's voice actors returning to reprise their roles. This time round, it seems that either the cast had better direction or were far more confident with their characters. Ryan Drummoll's performance is noticeably better than the first game. Drummond would also recommend friend and fellow voice actor David Humphrey to voice Shadow, who also gives a very strong performance. And speaking of Shadow, we should probably discuss how both he and Rouge changed over the course of development. For the most part, Rouge didn't change very much. She was always designed to play the role of a spy-type thief, though her early character designs do come across as being far more friendly compared to her final design. Shadow, on the other hand, had the most radical changes. Originally, he was designed in a way to be disfigured and even a monster-like counterpart to Sonic. Early concept art shows him with just one eye, facial scars, and just having a monstrous presence. Nothing is more terrifying than when you do the jazz hands. The development team eventually scrapped this idea of Shadow being a monster. Instead, they went with him looking more like a darker side of Sonic. Phrases like Sonic Shadow or Sonic's Other were often used to try and convey what they were going for. Eventually the name Shadow the Hedgehog stuck, and the final character ended up looking like a literal shadow to Sonic himself. This design concept even ended up being a literary idea within the game itself. Multiple characters and even the government mistake Shadow for Sonic on more than one occasion.
Oh, Sonic! I thought I'd never see you again! You're not Sonic! Who are you?
Don't worry, I'm sure Amy's never gonna make this mistake again.
Ironically though, the monster-type Sonic design would be later resurrected with the introduction of Mephiles the Dark in Sonic 06.
And that's pretty much all we know about the development of the game. It's a really strange trend regarding the more popular Sonic games. We just don't know very much about them compared to previous not as popular titles. And considering how open the team were with the first game and its development, it's really unusual that the sequel... That was a cat. It's really unusual that the sequel didn't get the same level of documentation from the development team themselves. Maybe one day Sonic Team will shed some more light on what actually happened with regards to the development of this game, but until then, let's move on to what really matters with video games: the gameplay.
Since this is the retrospective video, I won't be going too far in depth with the design theory, since this is just the same as the previous game, with a few noticeable exceptions. Your time has come! When it came to Sonic's gameplay, Sonic Adventure got a lot right on the first attempt. So why change it?
Oh, this question is going to have a very different answer when I eventually cover every game released after the year 2006.
Well, the answer is, you don't change it. You just improve on it. For lack of a better explanation, playing as Sonic and Shadow just feels better compared to the previous game. Jumping feels far more responsive, controls are more responsive, and they also allow for more precise, subtle adjustments when moving at both slow and high speed. Platforming just feels far more precise, and the upgraded moves and abilities, they just work this time, instead of a gamble as to if it'll do what you want, or if you'll end up in a bottomless pit.
No!
Despite the improvements, it's not perfect. There are some changes which do make it a worse experience. Spin dashes, for instance, now have to be charged up, and whilst this does solve the problem of spamming the move constantly like you could do in the first game, it just slows down the experience and it feels really annoying. The camera is positioned to a strict third-person view, which helps emphasize running through the stages at high speed, but it will switch and become far more dynamic for set-piece-like moments. The gameplay does, however, have some automated sections, but you still feel like you're in complete control at all times, and whilst later stages do have arbitrary death zones in order to prevent players from utterly cheesing the stage, the level of freedom to explore and make it through the stage is quite incredible, even compared to the previous game. Be honest, you all felt like a god when you made it to this room and discovered that you can actually use the spin dash to skip out most of this section.
Which I can definitely do, and I don't have to prove myself to you, especially since right now I have to talk about Tails and Dr. Eggman.
One of the main criticisms of Sonic Adventure was how Tails' stages felt way too similar to Sonic's. Even the gameplay was just a bite-sized Sonic campaign, with more emphasis placed on the efficiency of making it through the stage. So they changed his gameplay to turn him into Gamma the Robot.
Killed 17 police officers that night.
There is no way around it. When you first pick up and play Tails, the primary gameplay mechanic that he's known for can't actually be used in the game. Gameplay is restricted to a mech robot, and it's literally akin to Gamma's shooting gameplay from Sonic Adventure. Now that said, after you get past the initial shock factor, both Eggman and Tails have a much better experience compared to Gamma's gameplay. Stages feel far more chaotic, there's loads more enemies and threats to deal with. Threats come at the player from all directions, and there's a greater emphasis placed on precision platforming and navigation. There's even sections which utilize vertical climbing instead of just drops into what seems like a bottomless pit. If you consider Sonic's gameplay to be changed to make it more streamlined, Gamma's was changed just to give the player more stuff to do and engage with. But that said, whilst the gameplay is a radical improvement, without going too deep into critical analysis for this video, this change works brilliantly with Eggman. But with Tails, there are a few contextual problems. This isn't to say that the gameplay for Tails and Eggman is bad, it's not, it's very enjoyable, but you do have to go in with the knowledge that you'll be playing as Tails, but you can't fly, or do any of his other iconic staple moves. Anyway, let's move on to... oh, it's time. The treasure hunting gameplay is bad. The treasure hunting mechanic works almost identically to the first game, but with one key difference, that being the person who was designing this part of the game lost their mind, and instead of letting the player find any of the 3 targets in any order, Adventure 2 decided, why don't we restrict this so you can only find 1 target at a time? And the developers all thought this was a great idea. And they were wrong. As well as restricting the order in which you can find the targets, Adventure 2 also changes the hint system, which makes the treasure hunting stages slow and amazingly frustrating to play. And if you are that one person who thinks the opposite, well, that's the hill you're prepared to die on. But there is a reason why the Sonic Adventure 2 mod loader has an option built right into it that allows you to change the treasure hunting tracking to that of the first game.
So I'm not going to go too far into this because I like to save the gameplay analysis type stuff for the follow-up video, the Through the Looking Glass series.
Well, that means it's your time to smash that subscribe and the bell notification button. Do it before we die!
But that said, the treasure hunting in this game does have some big improvements over the first one.
For starters, the level design itself is a huge improvement. The first game was more or less smaller arenas that were cut out of Sonic stages, but now they're specifically designed stages, and as a result, they're designed with treasure hunting in mind. Stages can be vast, vast, with multiple levels to explore. They even incorporate their own unique puzzles and time mechanics. You really do feel like a mini Indiana Jones. In one stage, pushing a button floods a portion of it, which locks out and also unlocks different parts of the stage. You actually have to think ahead and solve problems in order to progress. In a weird sense of twisted irony, for as bad as the treasure hunting experience is, one of the stages actually has one of the game's coolest ideas. One of the stages is set in low Earth orbit, and there's different planetary bodies that you travel to, and you can actually enter their own gravitational pull and even orbit them individually. Once you actually land on these planets, you then have to figure out a way to break free of the planet's gravitational pull, just to make it to another part of the stage. Admittedly, this can become a bit annoying if you're trapped on a planet and you can't figure out how to break free from the gravitational pull, but when you do figure it out, it's amazingly cool, especially when you then fly off and orbit another asteroid and land on that one. But as cool as all these ideas and concepts are, it doesn't change the fact that underpinning it is such a poorly designed core gameplay experience which just ruins the general feel of it. So let's move on to the final character. Much like the first game, you can actually play as Super Sonic and even Super Shadow. Unfortunately, like the first game, there's not really much to say here. Yes, this is slightly improved that you can now move in all 3 dimensions, but the fight is essentially just a spectacle showcase reward for making it as far as the end. It's not great in terms of what you can actually do because there's very little to do, especially compared to the Sonic and Shadow stages. And that's all the main playable characters. There really isn't anything else in terms of gameplay, and hey, wait a minute, what does this key unlock?
Oh god.
So if you don't know, Chow are small creatures that you can raise by feeding them chaos drives from defeated enemies and other small animals that you can find in each stage. You can even race them against other NPCs. Hey, that doesn't sound too bad. Now that I've got my ultimate creature of destruction, let's head to the races. I don't like this. I really don't like Chow raising. I honestly can't believe that they brought this back near verbatim for the sequel with barely any improvements as to what it's like for the general user to— wait, what's this other section through here? They added a school? I can check its health, teach it abilities. There's a spooky black market shop and a fortune teller. The DX version has karate? The Chow Garden in Sonic Adventure 2 actually builds upon the original by greatly expanding the gameplay experience. It's no longer simply just raise the numbers of the stats to what you like. Now you've actually got to take care of your Chow's health. You can teach it abilities and even buy it gifts. What we have here is the fundamental requirement of a full-on Chow RPG. You can even transfer your Chow from Sonic Adventure 1 to Sonic Adventure 2. They really have tried to improve the user experience. Unfortunately, it still has problems which were in the first game. Most players will simply repeat the most efficient stages over the most fun ones to collect the right amount of chaos drives and find the specific animals that they need. It also takes a long time to evolve your Chow for the higher ranked races. It's unfortunately still a huge time sink, and if you're not into the virtual pet craze, it's a mandatory thing that you have to do to get the final secret unlock, which is a good one and deserves its own section. So whilst technically we've covered Sonic's gameplay, due to the design of this stage, it's a very different experience that you'll get from anything in the main 2 campaigns. Sonic Team essentially tried to create the original Green Hill Zone, but this time in a 3D environment. The level even starts with a classic side view camera, but you do have the option to reorientate it. You can use all of Sonic's moves and upgrades from the main game, but it just feels so different to anything in the main campaign. Due to the way that physics are coded in this game, there's a few tricks which are used to simulate the feeling of the original, such as this booster ramp which is at the end of this section to catapult Sonic into the air. But unlike the original game, once you're up here, you can actually use the light speed dash to grab these rings. It's a fun little reimagining of what could have been, and a really nice surprise when you eventually unlock everything. And they even remixed the Green Hill Zone theme just for this one stage. And speaking of the music, let's talk about just how awesome it is. If you consider Sonic Adventure to be one of the best soundtracks in gaming history, then Sonic Adventure 2 is the other choice. Primarily composed by Jun Sunu, the soundtrack sees numerous performers and artists providing both music and lyrics to the game. The soundtrack has been re-released multiple times over the years, and unfortunately, the original release by Wavemaster Entertainment is one of the most bootlegged gaming soundtracks of all time. In 2011, for Sonic's 20th anniversary, an official re-release was printed. Unfortunately, it's actually missing over half the tracks from the soundtrack. Only 28 of the 60 tracks from the original Multi-Dimension soundtrack were included, and only 2 tracks from the Cuts Unleashed vocal collection are on this CD. A vinyl release was produced and released by Brainwave, and the OST is also available on a variety of streaming services, and a number of songs have also been included on various collection OSTs. Several of the tracks and songs have become unofficial anthems of the Sonic brand. You want to get everybody singing along and instantly raise the mood of the venue? Play Escape from the City. You want to rip the roof off the venue? Play Live and Learn. It's a soundtrack that's got something for utterly everyone. You want to listen to something which is pop rock? Anything from Sonic Stages. You want something more heavy with rock and metal? Go Shadow. Or do you just want to sit and relax and chill out for a bit? In that case, anything from Rouge's funk-infused jazz themes, they'll easily reduce your stress levels. One of the most iconic songs has to be Live and Learn, performed by Crush 40's Johnny Gioeli. Between this and Open Your Heart, Live and Learn is widely seen as the anthem to the Sonic fanbase. It's such a loved track. If you go to a Sonic fan convention and the band opens with Open Your Heart, you can bet they're gonna close the gig with Live and Learn. Those are the 2 songs above all other that everybody expects to be played. It was even played to close out the 30th anniversary Sonic Symphony, and with the greatest respect to Crush 40, an entire string orchestra played an arrangement which accompanied their performance, and this individual string orchestra version has never been released. One of my favourite tracks has to be City Escape. Aside from the fact the song is really catchy and upbeat, how it's used in the game is a masterclass of timing. Just watch this next clip and notice how after the initial opening guitar riff, the full crash of music from the rest of the band kicks in the moment Sonic hits the streets.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south.
It's such an amazing coordination of game design and music.
But another track that I really love, and I just don't think it gets the recognition it deserves, would be this lady's theme.
Nobody cares about flying the freedom when they're young, but when they get old and they realise the world is a scary place that's trying to eat them, they suddenly surrender to the realisation that Rouge's music actually kicks ass. It's such a chill and relaxing blend of different jazz percussion and other instruments. You just can't help but take 5 and turn that dial to, at least 7 and let the music play. Given the huge success of the first title, it was inevitable that the second game would see a huge promotional campaign and supporting merchandise to accompany it. And it almost did! Unlike the first game, which saw 2 elaborate commercials involving plushies going on mini adventures, Sonic Adventure 2's commercials were a lot smaller in scale. The main Japanese advert had a crowd of people rushing through a city. It's an effort to mimic a real-life City Escape or Metal Harbor type stage, whereas the American and European commercials actually used real-life hedgehogs in a series of experiments to emphasize the difference between Sonic and Shadow being both good and evil hedgehogs. Even the GameCube port saw its own commercial, and this one involved a real hedgehog auditioning for the role of Sonic. The commercial is going for humour, but there really is some cringy moments with how close that megaphone is to that animal. But the strangest part is the ending. The narrator sounds amazingly bored when he's trying to make you buy the game. Take a listen.
The right hedgehog is hard to find. New Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, with extra 2-player action. Only on Nintendo GameCube, rated E for everyone.
Here's the video game. Go and buy it, you pieces of scum.
A slightly better commercial is this one from Japan. It depicts a criminal being chased by the police, and Sonic foils the getaway by a complete accident. It's not as good as the first game's commercials, but this one is still quite a fun one. So whilst the TV advertisements for the game were a little bit poor, the print advertising was on another level. Most magazine adverts placed emphasis on Sonic vs. Shadow, and even took cues from Star Wars, with some print adverts outright saying, "Join the dark side."
But there was one print advert which you just have to see it to believe it. It comes from Germany and, well,
It depicts Sonic as a biblical saint and Shadow the Hedgehog as the actual Antichrist. The way this is presented is very similar to Renaissance artwork, which depicts the battles between the forces of heaven and hell, and the image of the earth below them suggests that the two are fighting over the souls of mankind. But the most popular and successful promotional campaign by far was the partnership with the brand Soap Shoes. Soap Shoes were designed to let the wearer grind down rails and pipes in the form of extreme urban sports. Sonic's actual character design was modified so he wore a pair of soap shoes for the entire game, and signs advertising the shoes were placed all over the first stage. And this decision to modify Sonic's character design actually had a mini impact on the merchandise for the game, which we'll discuss in a moment. The mascot costumes which were created for the first game also returned for a number of in-person events, but they were also joined by some amazing looking Rouge Shadow and even a Dr. Eggman mascot costume. The costumes mainly appeared in Japan, but they weren't used to promote the game until several months after it had been released. The Shadow the Hedgehog costume did appear at a few future game promotions, such as the E3 2005 convention where it was used to promote the spin-off title Shadow the Hedgehog. Rouge, on the other hand, has never appeared again outside of the 2002 World Hobby Fair, and it's a shame because her costume looks incredible.
But the most mysterious one is actually the Dr. Eggman mascot costume. He didn't actually appear at the World Hobby Fair, but he did appear a couple of months later at the Sonic 10th anniversary birthday party, which we're going to talk about, now, actually.
Given how Sonic Adventure 2 released on Sonic's 10th anniversary, Sega of Japan decided to capitalise on this as a vehicle to not only promote the game itself, but also the Sonic brand as a whole. Whilst in recent years Sega have celebrated Sonic's anniversary globally, in 2001 these fan celebration events were a new thing, and this one was limited to the shores of Japan. The Sonic 10th anniversary party was essentially an early summer of Sonic style convention, designed to celebrate Sonic and promote more sales of Sonic Adventure 2. There were stage events in which Yuji Naka, Takashi Iizuka, even the Sonic Adventure mascot costume would come out and entertain the crowd. They even modified the costume to now wear soap shoes, and it seems that the Rouge costume was also present, but unfortunately, it's always just out of shot in literally every photo of the party. Fans were treated to interviews with different members of Sonic Team, and there was even a Q&A, and it wasn't just limited to questions about Sonic Adventure 2. One of the questions that was asked was about Hidden Palace from Sonic 2, and Iizuka actually gave a full answer to it. He even talked about Sonic 3's development and how they originally intended it to be a fully 3D game. There was a meet and greet session in which Naka and Iizuka would meet fans and sign autographs, and there was even a birthday cake. The party was also the stage for the announcement of the Sonic Adventure 2 birthday pack. It would consist of a copy of the game, a small collectible coin, a history book, and even a soundtrack CD, all contained inside a fold-out case. There was even a special limited edition 10th anniversary Sonic Dreamcast, along with statues, a crystal cube, a ring, and even a wine glass that I nicknamed the Grail. There was even a theatrical stage play. Sega used the Sonic mascot costumes to act out an original story at the party. This stage play would also tour a few shopping malls and a couple of other major events, but aside from the novelty of a Sonic stage show existing, it's notable for having an Eggman mascot costume, and it's a costume that's never appeared at any other events other than this stage play. If you want to find out more about this stage play, there's a video on my channel in which I go detail about the plot of the show and a few other bits of detail about both it and other Sonic stage plays that have existed throughout the years. A comic book adaptation was produced. Archie Comics produced an adaptation, or rather a prequel comic. Issue 98 of Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog told two stories. The first explores the backstory of multiple characters from the game, such as Rouge being hired by the President and Sonic being captured by gun soldiers just prior to the events of Escape from the City.
The second story, on the other hand, oh my goodness, we're all going to need some major therapy after this.
The second story is set 50 years before the events of the video game, and it actually depicts the raid on the Space Colony Ark, complete with a panel showing Maria Robotnik, who is a child, I'd like to remind you, being shot in the back and killed by a commando.
Not just content with showing us the moment she's gunned down, they then cut to her lifeless body on the ground with a smoke trail coming out of her back from where the bullets hit her. Fucking hell, Archie Comics!
A TV adaptation was also produced. Sonic X had a multi-episode arc which was very faithful to the events of the game. Most major scenes are here and the characters undergo a very similar storyline, though they did include a few unique elements in character dynamics which had some interesting undertones.
Look, Just because these two work together, go on dates together, there's this really awkward tension between them, especially in whatever's going on in this close and intimate scene, and Topaz gives her the please don't leave me eyes, doesn't mean that Topaz is going batty for the bat! However, in the Japanese dub, when Topaz pulls out her handcuffs and Rouge looks at her and says, "Ooh, are you into hard play?" Oh, you can totally see why thousands of people think that! Let's talk about the promotional merch.
Unlike the first game, Sonic Adventure 2 didn't get a huge toy and merchandise line upon release, but what merch it did get is now highly sought after due to a perfect storm of factors. A plush line was produced which depicted most of the main cast, and some consider these to be the best Sonic plushies ever made. Combined with the fact that they're the first plush incarnations of Shadow and Rouge, as well as being the only official plush of Sonic wearing soap shoes, these are now extremely expensive on the second-hand market. And remember how the toy company Resaurus leaked the inclusion of Rouge before the game's release? Yeah, those figures never came out. The toy company went out of business just before the toys went into production. But there were a couple of action figures actually released. Joyride Studios produced a Sonic and Shadow figure, as well as this unusual prototype figure. And that was pretty much everything.
Yeah, Sonic Adventure 2 really didn't get much merchandise to promote the game on release. In fact, these Joyride figures that I showed you earlier, when I was writing the script for this video, I legitimately thought that they were promotional merchandise for the original game, but as you can clearly see, they're not. They're for the GameCube port, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. But despite the lack of merch for the original Dreamcast release, there has been a small renaissance of Sonic Adventure 2 themed merchandise, which we'll take a little look at in just a few moments.
Sonic Adventure 2 did actually receive some DLC, though it was much smaller in scale compared to the original game. A series of Christmas and Halloween themed costume packs were released, which lets you customize your character. Some of the more fun ones was Sonic wearing a pumpkin mask, Eggman in a pumpkin-inspired Eggmobile, and Rouge became a witch. The game was originally developed and released for the Dreamcast, but following Sega's exit from the console market, a decision was made to port the game to the Nintendo GameCube. Re-released as Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, the game was re-released in full with some technical updates and additional content, but the bulk of these improvements and features actually went into the multiplayer components of the game. And controversially, some content was actually removed. Big the Cat appears in a couple of fun cameos throughout the campaign, but this was all but cut from the GameCube release. To add further insult, in multiplayer mode, he's no longer a playable character. He's been replaced by a Dark Chow Walker. Why would you do that? We love Big the Cat. Now. Unfortunately, the port does have its problems. Whilst it's nothing on the same level as Sonic Adventure 1, which saw dramatic changes to the lighting and entire stages looking completely awful, there are a couple of issues with the lighting effects. Some of it just looks a bit wrong, and in some scenes, there's some real oddities. Like in this scene where Maria's eyelashes have completely vanished. And in this scene, the entire Earth is gone. Oh, and those fun seasonal DLC costumes, they were removed completely. But another major update was to the Chow Garden. They added a new minigame called Chow Karate, where players could take their Chow and fight them against a series of NPC opponents. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. Now that I've got my ultimate creature of destruction, it's time to face the Fist of Fury.
Jesus Christ! Okay, before I get a bunch of angry Chow Karate fans at me saying you tried expert mode, that's not fair, let's now try it again, but this time on the beginner mode. Are you guys going to actually fight? Oh, for fuck's sake.
It would be almost a decade before the game saw a second re-release.
Let's roll that beautiful Sonic footage!
In 2012, the Xbox Live Marketplace was becoming a wasteland for leaking unannounced games. They managed to leak not only the Xbox port of Sonic Adventure 2, but also the PlayStation 3 version. That's impressive. Sega initially kept very quiet about the leaks, but at the 2012 Sonic Boom fan convention, in a manner which poked fun at the number of leaks that they'd suffered recently, they finally revealed the game. The so-called HD version would be updated to include online leaderboards, trophy and achievement support, as well as widescreen support. Xbox users could also unlock avatar clothing items if they wanted. The announcement was very positively received. However, the release was not without its controversy. Much like the HD release of Sonic Adventure, Sega split the GameCube battle content as a separate download pack, despite the fact the base game was the GameCube port. But one positive change from this version is that they actually restored the Big the Cat cameos. There was much rejoicing. You can technically get this game on PlayStation 4 and 5 thanks to PlayStation Now, and it's also available on Xbox One thanks to backwards compatibility. But the biggest attraction of this release was the Steam PC version, which opens the game up to mods and other fan-made enhancements, so it's a very easy game to get these days.
So with regards to this game, most people have either heard or played the original Dreamcast version, or this version, the GameCube DX edition. But what most people don't know is that this game actually has a third version. Yeah, there's actually another port of this to a completely different system that almost nobody has heard about, let alone played for themselves. How on earth is that possible? How can a game as well known as Sonic Adventure 2 have another version that's out there that almost nobody's ever heard of? Well, the reason for that is simple. Sonic Adventure 2 was officially ported to the arcades.
CR Sonic, as it was known, was released in 2003 to Japanese arcade, containing modified stages from Sonic Adventure 2 in attempts to create a completely new adventure for Sonic, despite most of the stages clearly being taken from the game. And if you're watching this footage thinking, what's with all those giant numbers everywhere? Well, my friends, this is probably the reason why you've never seen this game outside of Japan, because this isn't your typical arcade machine, it's a pachinko machine. Sonic Adventure 2 was so good, it got ported to Pachinko.
And if you're sat there thinking, oh god, Pachinko, it can't possibly get much worse than that. Oh, it can, my friend. It could get so much worse than that. Because this game didn't just get a third version, there was also a fourth version of this game where Sega decided to officially port it to a literal slot machine.
Released in 2008, Sonic Live is a slot machine that uses characters from Sonic Adventure 2, but now they're in a band. The game, if you can call it that, features several modified scenes from Sonic Adventure 2, such as Sonic and Shadow racing in City Escape whilst being chased by the gun truck. Critical reception for the game, while slightly lower than the original, was still very good. Critics seem to universally agree that whilst the game was a very good title, it didn't meet the highs that the original did. GameSpot's Shahed Ahmed's review encapsulates most critics' thoughts at the time.
The primary flaw in Sonic Adventure 2, the game meets but hardly exceeds expectations. Although Sonic Team was rectified in many of the problems that plagued the original, the sequel isn't as deep, and in fact the overall gameplay time isn't as long as the first game.
But IGN's Anthony Chow was far more positive, awarding the game a 9.4. Whilst he acknowledged that the game had similar problems that had been present in the original, such as the camera, he noted that Adventure 2 would likely be the last game on the Dreamcast, and thanks to how impressive he found it, he said that the Dreamcast didn't go out with a bang, but a sonic boom. And what do you do when your game does well? Well, you make a sequel, of course. And Sonic Adventure 2 would get its very own sequel, sort of.
So for those of you that are new to the channel, welcome to the part of the retrospect which is called Why This Game is Actually the Real Sonic Adventure 3!
The next major Sonic game to see release was Sonic Heroes. It continued Adventure 2's idea of multiple team scenarios, but this time they were split up across 4 separate teams. According to an interview with Bazooka on the now defunct website oneup.com, Heroes was originally going to be given the title Sonic Adventure 3, but this was changed in a bid to appeal to new audiences. Shadow the Hedgehog was also given the title title of Sonic Adventure 3, Shadow of a Hedgehog, and you can actually still find trace evidence of this on the internet to this day. Sonic Unleashed was also going to get this title, and in 2006, Sonic 06 was going to be called Sonic Adventure 3. The best evidence for this is the working mentality of Sonic 06 is exactly the same for Sonic Adventure, and in Sonic Adventure, there's this little kid who's crazy about shoes. Well, in Sonic 06, he appears again, but this time he's actually selling shoes, and it's the same character. And what are you doing? Look, it's my video. I can say this if I want. What are you doing? Get your hands off me! Let go of me! It's a free as Sonic 06, I say!
So now that all of my fictional disapproving anime wives have forbidden me from talking about why Sonic 06 is actually Sonic Adventure 3, remember at the start of the video how I said this?
There was actually a lot of evidence to suggest that this indeed was going to be the last ever Sonic game.
What the hell do you mean? How was Sonic Adventure 2 the last ever Sonic game? There's been loads of Sonic games since then.
The initial evidence for this is obvious. Sega were in a very bad place when Sonic Adventure 2 was being made. They were leaving the console market, and if you've ever worked at a company which suddenly announces radical internal structural changes, or God forbid enters administration, you'll know that suddenly that working environment goes from tolerable to
absolute hell. So I have been able to uncover a lot of evidence that does suggest that this was going to be the last ever Sonic game, but I am quite conscious about video time. We have been talking for a while now, and how long has this video been going on for? So I think the discussion about whether this was or was not supposed to be the last ever Sonic game is probably more suited to the analysis video, since it's also going to be looking at how various cutscenes are put together in terms of their cinematography and composition. So we're going to leave that for the next video. Click the subscribe and bell notification button. So let's take a look at the legacy of this game and see how it's still referenced 20 years after its original release.
Arguably, Sonic Adventure 2 left one of the strongest legacies of any Sonic game outside of Sonic and Knuckles. The biggest impact which came from the game are the characters of Shadow and Rouge. Shadow the Hedgehog became such a popular character just from this one appearance that despite dying at the end of the game, he was brought back to life for the next one. His popularity still remained so high that he eventually received his own spin-off title. And whilst it was bloody awful, Shadow the Hedgehog actually expanded upon Adventure 2's storyline and events, which had previously only been alluded to. You not only get to see more of the raid on the arc itself, you get to play through it. And you even see Gerald Robotnik working with Black Doom on the creation of Shadow the Hedgehog. Even today, Shadow is still so popular that he was more or less forced into the video game Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric, and he even appears in a few episodes of the TV show adaptation. And they even joke on the show that the only reason he's here is because
he's only the second most popular character in the whole canon!
Rouge would also become a staple of the Sonic series. She's appeared in multiple titles throughout the years, and she's also become a very popular fan favourite character, though Sega have more or less removed all traces of the potential romance that she and Knuckles developed during the game, and some fans are a bit annoyed at this. In 2011, Sonic Generations was released and City Escape was fully remade and reimagined. Shadow the Hedgehog also appears as a boss in a reimagined Final Rush setting. There's also been a small explosion in Sonic Adventure 2 themed merch in recent years. Shadow has seen multiple plush lines based on his character. You can even get a giant 21-inch tall Rouge the Bat plush if you like.
Wow! A 21-inch tall Rouge the Bat plush. That's amazing, but I wonder why they made one that big. I mean, I can't think of a single reason why anyone would want a giant Rouge the Bat plush in their bedroom. Why not write in the comments why you think someone would want a giant Rouge the Bat plush in their...
Zen Monkey Studios released a Sonic Adventure 2 pin badge set, and finally, after 2 decades of being cancelled, Rouge has finally got an action figure. Another major lasting legacy of the game is the music. The Sonic Adventure music experience has played multiple tracks from the game. Aside from popular songs like Live and Learn and City Escape, at the 2019 London performance, they actually played music from Pyramid Cave, and this was a surprise hit with the crowd. And as recently as 2022, several stages were rethemed and included in Sonic Frontiers, and some people thought that these stages would be just as fun to play. Those people were wrong. Oh, I have a lot to say about you. There's a lot to say about you. Anyway.
So we now come to the part of the video where I kind of have a little bit of personal reflection and talk about how I felt about the game when I first played it and in the years since. But I have a feeling it might generate a little bit of a reaction with you, because the first time I played Sonic Adventure 2, it wasn't this version that everybody loves, it was this version! The GameCube Player's Choice Edition of the game! Oh goody!
I don't remember exactly when I picked up Sonic Adventure 2, just that it was the GameCube version. I was initially quite disappointed with it. I loved the original one so much that I was really confused as to why they'd got rid of the hub worlds, and why in many ways I felt that the game was a bit of a step down from the original.
I'll make you eat those words!
But now that I'm a little bit older, wiser, grouchier, and here to destroy your happy memories of childhood, Sonic fans, I've actually warmed up to it a little more. This version of the game, at least. Now, I can't in all good conscience say that this is the pinnacle peak Sonic experience overall. It's not, and personally I prefer the first game more to this one, because I think the first game actually does a better job in multiple areas, and I'm not just talking about the gameplay. I think that the first game absolutely nails a lot of the deeper and more subtle themes that it's going for far better than this title does.
For example, Sonic and Shadow constantly accuse the other of being a fake or a cheap copy, and each time they meet, they both try to destroy or outperform each other in order to justify their existence and prove that they're the original and therefore the best. And this idea of fake versus original keeps popping up. As a brief example, you have the real and fake Chaos Emerald, which becomes an important plot device. Both are as capable as the other, and both are key in the resolution of the conflict. It presents this idea to the player that Sonic and Shadow's rivalry is ultimately meaningless. The notion that one's efforts to compare and try and one-up your peers is quite pointless on the grand stage. What matters is how you utilize your own place within the world you're given.
Which could have been huge, but unfortunately, the game itself undermines this idea multiple times, and we'll look at this in way more detail in the follow-up Through the Looking Glass video. But that said, there are some vast improvements to this over the original.
For example, Sonic's gameplay is probably the best it's ever been, and I find it baffling that they've never even attempted to return to this style. The shooting stages have things to shoot at now!
And the treasure hunting stages, people modded them so they're somewhat playable. Sonic Adventure 2 taught people how to program and code. Sonic Adventure got people jobs. There's a lot more that I could say about this game, but I'm going to save that for my next video, Through the Looking Glass, a Sonic Adventure 2 analysis. And if you'd like an idea as to what to expect from that video, highly recommend you check out the video I did on the previous game, Through the Looking Glass, a Sonic Adventure analysis. So don't forget to click that subscribe and the bell notification button and go to my Patreon page and give me money. That way I can actually afford to make that video. Please?
Looking at the second-hand market, the Dreamcast version is really expensive now. The GameCube version is more reasonable, but it's a slightly lesser experience. If you're one of the few people who haven't played it yet and are curious to try it out, the easiest way to get it is via PC. It's very reasonably priced on the Steam store, but it normally drops to just $1 whenever a major sale rolls around. There's also a very active modding community, and you can get the game running almost flawlessly and looking very close to the original Dreamcast version.
So if you are one of the few people out there who have yet to try this game, you should definitely consider picking it up. It's a game I can highly recommend to you. If you have some memories about the game that you want to share, please post them down below in the comments box. Or if you have any suggestions for other games that I should cover, please list them down below, including ones that are outside of Sonic, because I like to try and play other games as well. Or just say hi and hello, and I will probably say hello back to you. Anyway guys, thank you so much for taking the time out to watch this video. Don't forget to comment down below and smash that like button, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye.
Hey guys, so this video took a long time to make. I really don't want another video to take as long as this one has, so thank you for being so patient. I just want to give a special thank you to all my fellow content creators who helped out with this video, be it by some research, just taking a photograph, or doing a performance to camera like Shaz did, which absolutely blew me away. So now we get to the awkward part of the video, for me at least. YouTube is becoming an increasingly difficult place to produce content for. So if you liked this video and would like to see more videos like this, and feel that the value of just $1 per month is worth supporting this kind of work, please consider supporting me on Patreon like these incredible people did. The link to do so is in the video description. Since this particular project took so long, I've decided to credit everyone regardless of their Patreon tier for this video, but I would especially like to thank the following people for their continued incredible support. Atomic Kittens, Ben Malski, Brian Mazzarella, Dave Morley, Mayfer Stevenston, Rustic Coolpix, Seracor, Stalin Usher 2, That Gamer, aka That Yaki Guy, who I've definitely mispronounced the name of, The Wax, Tybut Renux, and Yui Senpai. Without you guys, I don't think I'd be able to make this long form content, so I'm especially grateful to you, and also to you for just watching this video. If you found it interesting or entertaining in some way, please leave a like, or just say hello in the comments. Maybe even consider sharing the video if you really enjoyed yourself. But most of all, as always, just thank you for taking the time out to check out this video and spending your time listening to what I've got to say. It really does mean the world to me. Thank you. I don't think anybody will notice that the Christmas tree mysteriously vanishes because I had to redo this section due to a mistake, but I didn't realise until several weeks later, and in that time a Christmas tree was brought down out the loft and completely decorated, and I couldn't take it down, so that's why there's a Christmas tree in one of the shots and not in any of the others. I don't think anybody will notice though, do you?